This episode of the RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by the BC Centre for Agritech Innovation at Simon Fraser University. Are you ready to grow your farm business with cutting-edge technologies and innovative solutions? Our centre will drive you towards an advanced future. Get the investment, expertise, and support you need to test and develop your products or ideas through our Agritech Development Program. Google SFU Agritech Innovation to learn more.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, of course, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. It is Agronomic Monday today, so we'll be joined by Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. We're going to talk about a number of different things with Wheat Pete here today. Going to review some RealAgristudies data on the frequency of soil testing. Some interesting things there. Want to work through it with him. We're also going to talk about dormant seeding of spring wheat in Western Canada, when you should maybe do that. And can autonomy be a benefit to not only the larger farms, but also maybe the so-called one-man band as well? We'll also have a product spotlight with Simon Fraser University, and we'll also have time today for the top ag news stories of the day. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Of course, you can find us across all the different social media platforms, or you can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Keep the feedback coming on how the carbon tax has impacted your farm or will impact your farm. We're going to be at the APAS annual general meeting tomorrow in Regina. Really looking forward to that. That'll be played on Wednesday's show. Okay, so we're going to do a live recording tomorrow with the great people at APAS, the Saskatchewan's General Farm Organization, I should say. And looking forward, these live recordings of the show are so much fun. The audience loves it. They get to actually see the show happening, and I get a chance to do the show that I love doing every single day in front of the great audience as well. So it's a lot of fun. And I try to make sure we got time at the end for some questions and interact with the audience, and that's really fun because that really tests your scope of being able to answer such a wide variety, because you don't know what's coming, right? And people always ask some questions way off the radar, which is always a really good time. So I'm looking forward to being with APAS tomorrow, and that'll be on the show here on Wednesday. I'm going to say it, this time of the year, the weather, my favorite season is fall. Favorite. Okay, I love sweater weather. You go outside. You don't necessarily have to have that coat yet, or maybe you start the day in a coat, but you peel her off in mid-afternoon when the sun is out and you get some beautiful, beautiful weather. So that's my favorite time. Right now, at least where we are, we have no snow, and we are locked in on this. The chance of doing outdoor activities is really, really low. What do you do when the weather is like this? You can't ride your mountain bike. It's too bloody cold. And it's not like you can go sledding in the coulees or anything like that because there's no snow. So it's kind of, we're in that time period. And my kids were talking about, they're all coming home at Christmas time. And they were talking about, hey, can we go skating on the local rink or the local pond and stuff like that inside the neighborhood? Doesn't look like it right now. Some things got to change between now and then if we're going to do any sort of ski. So hoping for a white Christmas here in these parts. And it looks like Eastern Ontario definitely getting some of that here right now. A pretty good dump of snow. I wish, again, like was said on the Farmer Rapid Fire, I wish some of that wet snow would push its way westward. But you know what? Well, there's still lots of time. You don't, as was said last week, you don't lose a crop in December. May, yes. December, no. Anyway, okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to dive into a whole bunch of topics there with Wheat Pete. He'll be with us right after this. It's now time to do a product spotlight with FCC Ag Expert, and we're joined right now by Sarah Boychuk. Let's talk about the role that FCC Ag Expert plays in knowledge transfer amongst the generations on the farm.
So a really good example of that is actually another kid that I've worked with over this last year, Maddie from Learning About Ag with Maddie. She is a 5th generation farmer. She's a grade 5 student, and her family has been using Ag Expert, and they have really used that as a tool to get every generation involved in the farm. So her grandpa, for example, went back and added data about their farm back to 1972. And that data is there for Maddie to use and to learn from. So because Ag Expert is so simple, it's just a great opportunity to get the whole family involved and pass on those principles of farm management from one generation to the next.
That's agexpert.ca. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday, brought to you by Blackhawk EVO from New Farm. Blackhawk EVO is the next evolution in pre-seed burn-down herbicides powered by Duplossin. Blackhawk EVO delivers fast, flexible, and complete control of early germinating and winter annual broadleaf weeds. Find out more by going to newfarm.ca. Okay, joining us right now is Pete Johnson. Hey, Pete. Great to chat with you here on this Monday.
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. Good to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity. By the way, it is a crappy day in Ontario. There is no sunshine. Man, if you are affected by seasonal affective disorder, right, where the lack of sunshine has a negative impact on your mental attitude, this November, this early December, you would be a grumpy bear because we just have not seen much sunshine.
Yeah, kind of felt the same here yesterday in Lethbridge, where I was saying to Lindsay earlier today, we were chatting that it was 1:00 in the afternoon yesterday, and people's daytime running lights were on because it was just so overcast and kind of gloomy. It was weird. It's just it does play a little bit where it's like I'm the kind of person when I'm in the house, I got all lights on because when it's so dark, I get tired. I just felt tired all weekend because of some of that. How kind of gloomy it was out, and we haven't Eastern Canada got a bunch of snow here over the weekend or yesterday and into today, but we're still pretty brown here, my friend. Still pretty brown. Still waiting for some of that moisture.
Yeah, I understand that you guys have had no snow, and it's warm there to boot. And you talk about it being gloomy. We left yesterday about what time was it? 3:30 in the afternoon. Should have been glorious. Our Christmas lights had already turned on because they're on a photo sensor, right? So It was that gloomy that the Christmas lights were on, and no snow here in southwestern Ontario. You actually have to get to eastern Ontario before there's much snow. Although last week to the north we had quite a bit of snow in Ontario as well, But here in the banana belt portion of southwestern Ontario, we are just as brown as Western Canada.
Yeah, well, speaking of banana belt, I think we've got a high of 16 Celsius on Wednesday. Now it comes with like an 80-kilometer-an-hour wind, but I guess it's going to be 16, so there is that. Not very December-like temperatures.
Crazy is what that is. Crazy.
Yeah. Okay, I want to dive into a number of topics here, but I guess give us the update on corn harvest. Still progressing. I was in Calgary last week and talked to a number of people from central and eastern Canada about some of the corn yields, and it sounds like I don't know, good, decent speculation that we're going to break a new corn yield record this year. Is that fair?
So we're definitely in the game for that, Shaun. Where it finally ends up, Wheat Pete had a record corn yield on his farm, but that doesn't mean very much because I don't have many acres. But yeah, it has been really good in Eastern Ontario, like just blow the doors off good. In fact, the corn performance trials at Kinburn, if you can imagine this, the average yield on the Ontario Corn Committee performance trials at Kinburn, Ontario, which is, north of Ottawa, northwest of Ottawa, like not a long heat unit area, 304 bushel per acre average. The top hybrids at 331 bushels per acre. You just go wowzers. So no question that part of the world, they've got super yields. In fact, you go east of Toronto, you pretty much get into very good corn yields. You get into southwestern Ontario, and there's lots of great yields, but there's also some pretty mediocre yields. So it will depend on how many mediocre yields we have versus how many really great yields we have. Some really phenomenally interesting stuff on that front. You look at tar spot. If you're south and west of London and you did not spray for tar spot and you grew a highly susceptible hybrid, which, we're still determining which of those hybrids are highly susceptible versus the best we get is kind of just susceptible. There's nothing that is even close to moderately resistant. So everything's susceptible, but some are just more susceptible. 60 bushel per acre yield hit if you didn't spray those hybrids. Crazy.
Yeah.
Now, I think most acres got sprayed, but there are certainly growers out there with 150 bushel corn yields that would normally expect to get close to 200 in those situations.
Well, we had your neighbor, Eric Dietrich, on the show on Thursday on the Farmer Rapid Fire, and he admitted on air, Pete, to all of us that your wheat looks pretty good this fall.
He was being too kind. He was being absolutely too kind. My wheat looks okay, but again, we had that big rain, and it's funny how this works, Shaun, because I haven't seen this before. But it was soybeans prior to the wheat. That's just the typical Ontario rotation. We got a massive, I think it was 3 inches in an hour when the soybeans were just at the first trifoliate stage or something like that. Maybe they were a little bit bigger than that, but just late June. And water laid in a spot in that field where water has never laid before because it came so fast that it just couldn't get in. And it's a beautiful farm where the wheat is, but it just came too fast. And this fall, it's like that compaction that the water created in the soybean crop is still there. And I have a little pocket in that field where I'm looking at that just saying, wow, I might have to put in an open drain. I call it a French drain, a blind inlet, but, some gravel over top of tile because the water just wants to lay there now, which it never did before, but it's there now. And you just go, wow, how come that is that? I think it's just compaction from that really heavy rain, but it is not going away the way I'd like it to.
Why is that called a French drain?
That is a good question. Maybe the French were the first people to do that process. I actually don't know. It's commonly referred to as either a blind inlet or a French drain, and I would have to Google why, Shaun. I don't know that.
Nice. Okay. Well, we'll go with that. Also on Thursday's show, what we also heard, I think this is a good agronomic strategy, is we had Shaun Haney on from Foremost, Alberta. And Shaun talked about how, they got it was pretty dry through the season, not a great crop, but they got a little bit of fall moisture and enough to make them put winter wheat in to try to take advantage of some of that moisture and maybe get a bit of a jump on the growing season this fall and into the spring. If we do get some of that wet snow, hopefully that we're really, really going to need in these parts. I found that to be kind of interesting. And I do wonder, and there's probably I'm going to get a bunch of emails describing why people don't do more of this, but I kind of do wonder why we don't see more of that in this cycle where we've seen so much dry weather, more winter wheat. But you got to get the fall moisture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the problem always, right, Shaun, is that winter wheat, is it going to survive the winter? And you plant it, man, if you get a bit of fall moisture, but it doesn't come timely enough, you don't get a big enough plant, and it goes to minus 40 with no snow, then you end up replanting the next spring. So it's a challenge, but you're, once again, Shaun, the budding agronomist, is 100% right in terms of using that fall moisture, using that winter moisture, having the crop there utilize that and transpire it as into growth, as opposed to having it evaporate from the soil surface before you get the spring wheat planted, is a massive win on a dry season. And, Daniel Konopelski in Saskatchewan back at dormant seeding spring wheat. Now, you kind of go, wow, could that work? And you just said you're going to, did you say 18 or something like that? You go to 18, you got spring wheat in the ground. It better not stay 18 for long, because that stuff's going to germinate. Now, Daniel's in Saskatchewan, and I don't think they're going to be that warm. But finding ways to utilize that winter moisture and not giving it away to evaporation, that's a big win in a dry cycle, no doubt about it.
Yeah, we're 16 16 Tuesday tomorrow, and then 14 on Wednesday, but then she drops down again to like a high of 3, and maybe some snow.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that dormant seeding of spring wheat, could you do that now?
So the answer is absolutely. Why not? Yeah, as long as you get it seeded. The real trick, and Brian Barris had this discussion, the real trick is that the soil temperature has to be less than 2 Celsius. And so if you're putting that seed in the ground at an inch deep, and if you put it in today and you get one more day of warm temperatures, well, it takes time for the seed to imbibe the moisture before germination really kicks in. And so dormant seeding today, as long as it does go cold tomorrow or cold the next day, and your soil temperatures are under 2 Celsius, you can dormant seed pretty much any time that the drill will put that seed in the ground an inch deep. In Montana, sometimes they've been known to seed dormant seed barley in January and into coffee grounds. The soil is kind of freeze dried, and so they will dormant seed at an inch and a half deep into what is frozen soil, but because it's so dry, it just acts like coffee grounds, and that works as well. Dormant seeding, it's all about soil temperature and how many warm spells you get before we actually get to spring. That's the real rub.
Yeah.
And we tried December in Ontario, but we get too many warm spells, and so it's about a 50% success rate for us.
Yeah,
I expect in Western Canada, it would be better than that. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think from the warm spell, I think where I am in Lethbridge would be more of a concern in that regard, but like north of Calgary into the Saskatchewan, Manitoba, way less of a concern. Like you look at the forecast this week for Saskatoon, and we don't get above 5 the entire week, right? So and lows of minus 11 and 13. So much more cool than we're seeing here in the Southern Alberta Banana Belt, indeed. So, yeah, interesting. Okay, Pete, we got to take a break. We've got more coming up here on Agronomic Monday. We're going to talk about, does autonomy provide opportunity for farmers that farm by themselves, or just the larger farms that are trying to fill some labor gaps? That and a whole lot more. You're listening to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM.
Through a growing storm of kochia, cleavers, chickweed, and more, there's a clear path. Introducing Oxbow, a versatile cereal broadleaf herbicide that gets the job done. Powered by Duplisan technology, Oxbow is your workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds. With flexibility in timing, rates, and recropping options, your path is clear. Find your way on the path of least resistance at newfarm.ca/Oxbow.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Co-ops Grown with Purpose recognizes how your farm brings sustainability, agronomics, and safety to our food, community, and environment. What you do matters. Make it count. Contact your local co-op grow team member to learn more. Shaun Haney here, joined by Peter Wheat Pete Johnson, both of us with Real Agriculture. Hey, Pete, I want to ask you a question. On RealAg on the Weekend, which is the show we do in Saskatchewan on the RealAgriculture radio network, I was talking about autonomy and some of the opportunities that I see for autonomy. And I was chatting about, I get whenever we talk about this, I get feedback from people that mainly farm by themselves, and there's a lot out there. They say, I don't see any opportunity for autonomy. That's for larger farms or farms that are trying to replace employees. I do all the farming myself, and I'm not trying to replace myself. Therefore, I don't see a fit here. You're somebody that farms on your own for the most part. How do you see autonomy? Do you see it as something that provides opportunity, or is it kind of a non-factor for you?
Oh man, the opportunity that autonomy offers to everybody is just phenomenal, Shaun. And I think the challenge always is, so I love driving combine. It is probably the best job in the world. I hardly ever get to do it because whenever, like, if I'm going to drive combine, that means that the wagons are parked at the side of the field. When the wagons are full, Peter gets out of the combine, gets in the tractor, drives the wagons to the elevator, dumps them, brings them back, and gets in the combine again. And the efficiency of that is just in the sewer. So if we could have autonomy and things could happen, it really frees you up to do other things. And sometimes those other things can make you a whole lot of money. Now, on the other hand, if you absolutely love driving that combine, and even though you're only going to get half as much done or whatever that number is, you're going to drive that combine, then you're right. Autonomy probably doesn't help you very much. But the other challenge with autonomy, Shaun, from a small single operator like me, is how many acres do I have? How much does the autonomy cost? Even when I look at simple things like auto steer, and you start looking at what does it cost me to have auto steer, which, by the way, it just is so nice that even if it doesn't make economic sense, I'm going to do it because it just makes your life so much better. And it makes crooked drivers like me look smart because you actually drive in a straight line now. It's really awesome. But you do get into the economy of scale. How much does that autonomous tractor cost you, or whatever piece of autonomy you're looking at, versus how many acres can you cover with it? And I think that's where we get into situations like they have in Australia, where you can't buy an autonomous sprayer. You hire a company that brings in whatever, 5, 3, 12 autonomous sprayers, and they bring the specialist with it. And so that individual runs those on your farm, because if something breaks down, it's so specialized that they need that level of expertise to keep that stuff going. So it really does come down to kind of these economies of scale and can I make it work economically? But from a mundane task kind of thing, and even if I look at some of the other opportunities, we haven't talked about split nitrogen, but in my corn crop this year, there were some growers saw some pretty big, well, you mentioned Eric Dietrich, you talked to him last week, he saw some pretty big benefits to split nitrogen on his corn crop this year. Man, if you could do that and do it autonomously, where the thing steers itself and you don't have to be in the field and it's not mundane, man, I think there's some real big wins there, as long as it's economic.
I agree. I think it actually makes, for some of the smaller farms, or what I would call like the one-man band, I think it actually makes that farm even more scalable, right? Like, there's some real advantages there.
100%, like way more scalable if you can rent the land or buy the land. Here in my part of the world, it just seems to be there's just not enough land for the demand that's out there. So that seems to be the limiting factor. But yeah, if it's available, way more scalable.
I want to move on to some soil testing data, but first, Pete, I want to mention Invita bridges the nitrogen gap all season long, enabling your corn crop to fix the nitrogen it needs from the atmosphere when and where it needs it most. Let Invita set your crop up for success by requesting it from your local retailer. Okay, we've got some, and we've talked about this before, but I want to come back to some of this data. September of 2022, so just over a year ago, RealAgristudies surveyed some farmers in regards to some of their agronomic practices related to soil sampling and VRT and things like that. And what was interesting, and now there are very clear differences between East and West, and we can talk about that a little bit. We asked people, how often do you have your field soil sample and test it? In Western Canada, 58% said every year. In Eastern Canada, it was 10%. And Eastern Canada, actually, the majority of farmers were every 2 to 3 years. So we can address that. But what I wanted to hit on with you is across the country, 42% every year, 38% every 2 to 3 years. And I guess maybe let's start there, Pete. Why the difference between East and West?
Well, that's pretty simple, Shaun. In Eastern Canada, it's almost impossible to do a nitrogen soil test. Whereas in Western Canada, because you're a dry climate, you have super cold winters, you can soil test for nitrogen in the fall, and that nitrogen is generally still there in the spring. And so you can use that information to predict the proper nitrogen rate or to utilize in your nitrogen calculations. And when you say 58% every year from a nitrogen standpoint, you grow lentils, you don't need nitrogen. Why would you soil sample for nitrogen?
Right.
But you grow canola, you grow spring wheat, you grow winter wheat, you grow barley, all of those crops, you should be soil sampling in the fall. So is 58% a high enough number? I don't know. Is there that many lentils and peas that don't need, and soybeans in Western Canada? I wonder if that is even high enough at that. So we don't sample every year in Eastern Ontario, or Eastern Canada rather, because it's a nitrogen thing. For phosphorus and potash, every 2 to 3 years is often enough. But for, what do you say, 38% of the people to do it every 2 to 3 years, it should be 100%. It simply should be 100%. There's no question about that.
Okay, so that's interesting. So if you look at across the country, because right away people jump to the every year line, but it's actually the every 2 to 3 years that right now at 38%, that number is the number that should be higher across the country. Interesting.
So absolutely in my mind. Now it depends on how the question was asked as well, Shaun.
Well, how often do you have your field soil sampled and tested?
Right. And my only point though is that maybe we have to add the 38% with the 42%. Because if I say every year, but I'm
true.
still
Okay,
soil
good point.
sampling
Yep.
every 2 to 3 for P and K. Anyway, there's a gray zone there. I don't know what that.
Yeah. So you tell me if you think if you would have taken the over or the under on this. We asked farmers about that are soil sampling. Do you adjust your your rates based on the results of the tests? 84% said yes. Do you think that number would be higher or lower?
I actually probably would have taken the lower number, but I would have done that just because I'm a doubting Thomas. Like, why would you soil sample if you didn't use those numbers to change your fertilizer recommendations? Like, it's sort of like checking your bank account and realizing you don't have enough money and spending the money anyway. It's incomprehensible to me, Shaun. When all my clients pull soil samples and we use those soil samples to predict what fertilizer applications we should use. We even do nitrate soil samples on a lot of fields where we have manure applied, but we do them in the spring, not in the fall, just a little different scenario. And that becomes part of that discussion as well for corn nitrogen fertilizer. For 16% of the people to soil sample and not use that data, why bother?
So here's another one I'll run by you. And we have, with RealAgristudies and the Insights panel, there's a lot of demographics. But here's, like, sometimes the breakdown about how, larger farm versus smaller farms, age, region, you could make sense of it. I found this one very fascinating. Age is a very strong determinant of whether or not someone soil samples. The younger you are, the higher the probability it is that you do a soil sample on a yearly basis or every 2 to 3 years. How about that?
100%. Good.
Really?
It's the way it should be.
But that doesn't surprise. I thought that would be more even through all the ages. You're not surprised that people under the age of 35 and through all the ages, it's a very, very distinct diagonal line. You're not surprised by that?
No, I'm not, Shaun. And maybe it's because farmers are creatures of habit. And I still talk to older farmers who are still putting on 200 pounds of 16 because that's what I've always done. And you just go, oh my gosh. The younger farmers, I hope, are better educated. I know most of the young agronomists, like 95 or 98% of the younger agronomists that I deal with are way better educated than Wheat Pete is. And so good, better education, understand the value of the test better, test and then use those results. It's good. I wish actually it was all age groups because all age groups should, but it's one of the questions I always ask. What are the most dangerous words in agriculture? And the answer, Shaun, is I have always done it this way. And older farmers get caught in that mindset and it's always worked. So I'm just going to keep doing it that way. And it's not the right answer, but I think that's why we end up here. Plus older farmers, maybe they're a little bit more comfortable from a profitability standpoint. They've built their equity. Whereas younger farmers, you're in Middlesex County paying $42,000 an acre for land. You got to make that work. And so then you pay more attention.
Okay. Before we wrap up here, I got another one for you. So we asked farmers across the country, there's like 800. And so answering this question was 870 farmers. That's a significant amount. So do you use variable rate fertilizer application based on soil tests? What percent do you think of the farming population is using variable rate? What would you guess?
So my guess is pretty small. I'm going to say less than 10%.
Well, that was 40. It was 40.
Wow, are you serious?
40%. 55% said no, and 5% said I used to. Now, here's an important piece of this, though, okay? It's very clear that it's not on all the acres. Okay? So only 30 of the people that were using variable rate, only 34% said 100%. And it just kind of goes down pretty strongly from there, right? So like the bulk of people are using it on around that 50 to 74 in that range, or to 85%. That's kind of where the bulk is. It's definitely not on all the acres. But I'll admit to you, I thought that number was kind of high too.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm also glad. And I wonder, again, I'd like to see the split on we're doing VRT on nitrogen versus we're doing VRT on phosphorus and potash versus we're doing VRT on all nutrients, because that would be an interesting number. That's a future AgriStudy question for you, Shaun.
Yeah.
But 40%, that's good. We should all get there, because environmentally, from a phosphorus standpoint here in Ontario, it just makes perfect sense to do that. You need good fertility, but we also cannot be an environmental problem. And if you treat every acre the same, you're either going to under-fertilize or you're going to be an environmental problem. You can't get around it.
And finally, farm size. Okay. So the larger the farm, the more often you're soil testing, and the larger the farm, the more likely you are to be using variable rate fertilizer application. How about that?
Yeah, so that makes good sense to me, because if you're a large farm and you apply VRT and you can target your fertility better across more acres, you can spread the cost of the VRT technology over more acres. It's more cost effective and it makes you more profitable. VRT should make everybody more profitable, but if it's the same as autonomy. If I'm trying to buy all the equipment and do VRT on 100 acres, like buy an autonomous tractor on 100 acres, the economy of scale works against you. So that does make some sense to me. The other thing I'll say on larger farms, and this maybe isn't entirely true, but you get to be a big enough farm, you either hire an agronomist or you have an agronomist on staff. And once you get the agronomist involved, most of the time they're going to push towards VRT just because it makes so much sense. And I think that would be another factor in that decision.
Yeah. Good. Great comments there, Pete. Hey, Pete, really appreciate you joining us here today. All the best to you this week, okay?
Yeah, you as well. Thanks for having me, Shaun. Just enjoy the week, even if it's crappy weather. Well, it'll be warm. That'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm headed to Regina tomorrow for APAS, their annual meeting. So, tonight I'm headed there, but I'll be there tomorrow. So I'll experience some of that Saskatchewan December weather, I think, if I look at the forecast properly. Okay, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we got a product spotlight with Simon Fraser University, and then the top ag news stories of the day right after this.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Joining me now for today's product spotlight is Chris Turco. He's the CEO of FP Genetics. What sets your company apart from other Western Canada seed companies?
I think what sets us apart really is our people. We're a privately held company that is owned by over 170 farmers in Western Canada. It happens to be farmers that have a shared passion for new varieties, a shared passion for evaluating varieties on their farm, choosing the best genetics for their farm, and they happen to love producing seed and offering those varieties to their neighbors in their community. And then our staff, most of our staff is kind of mid-career, and they've been involved in seed from day one, right from our R&D group where we are evaluating varieties on a regional level for farmers, right through to our sales team, like I said, where half of them are still on the farm.
All right, there's a lot of exciting stuff out there and some big decisions to make for 2024. So always nice to have good options, and always great to have you on the show, Chris.
Thank you very much, Lindsay.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am Lindsay Smith, and it is time for today's product spotlight. Joining me now, I've got Dr. Soo Kim, Scientific Director with the BC Centre for Agritech Innovation and Professor with Simon Fraser University for Mechatronics and Engineering. Welcome here, Dr. Kim.
Hi, Lindsay.
Tell me what this Agritech Innovation Centre is and how it works for farmers and producers in BC.
Oh, thank you. So BC Centre for Agritech Innovation, in short, the BC CAI, actually was established last September. We spent about a year now based on the government's initiative, federal together with the provincial government. So both governments funded about $16.5 million for next 5 years and then created our organization. So we focus on the economic growth of BC's small and medium-sized companies in agritech and their product commercialization. So BC's CAI, we focus on the three activities we call the three pillars. Number one is project co-creation. And basically, if you think about there's one of the examples of triple helix innovation model, which is the collaboration between government, university, and industry. So we follow that model to co-create projects together. Number two, we support the training program for our communities, the skill uptake. So any types of new technology training for our farmers and growers. And number 3, basically, these all training program creation or the project creation, all based on the ecosystem building, right? So number 3 is actually, we focus on the ecosystem building, agri-tech and agriculture ecosystem building in BC. So we focus on those 3. So, as you asked, how can you benefit farmers and growers, right? So that's one of important thing. We focus on, although we focus on the small and medium companies, farmers and growers in BC, as you know, BC is heavily rely on the agriculture industry, and farmers or growers are foundation of it. So we focus on how to farmers and growers to uptake recent technology or to be the tech savvy, right? So we're talking about not the fundamental agriculture field. We really thinking about agri-tech because we talk the technology to advance the agriculture practices. These agri-tech can be the solution for our recent climate crisis resilience and etc.
So Dr. Kim, what's an example of a project that BC Kai has helped develop?
I think I can put the 2 examples. Number 1, in terms of project creation, we just completed the first project we made with the BC company named Lucent Biosciences. Actually, they focused on making organic fertilizer and manufacturing sustainable fertilizer to enable healthier crops with improved sustainable yields. So testing new fertilizer products, so together with the BC Kai for their efficacy and the application rates in various crops. That's one example. Typically, that's together with a small and medium company. And the other example we did was a training program together with the indigenous community. One of the innovative indigenous community in northern BC near Taras, they actually wants to train their farmers and the students by having the drone-based crop analysis. So we 100% funded that for their sustainable training themselves. So that is a really good example to support our farmers in BC.
So it sounds like there is definitely a wide variety of what BC Kai would be working on. How can members of our audience find out more information and perhaps access BC Kai support?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for asking that. So actually, BC Kai is doing a lot of activities to promote. So you can hear, like today, through radio, or the main thing is you can visit the BC Kai website. So you can just Google BC Kai, right, SFU, then you can find out ours. And we produce quarterly newsletters and then spread all through BC Networks ecosystem through the growers and farmers and the industry. So you can hear about that too. And as I mentioned, those 3 pillars, we're doing a lot of events in sponsoring events and hosting the Knowledge Cafe or those workshops too. So you can hear a lot about BC Kai through those.
All right. And so it's BCCAI if anyone is looking for that. And thank you, Dr. Kim, for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.
All right.
Have a good day.
You too. We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Now we'll be joined by Heather Watson, Executive Director with Farm Management Canada. Give us an update. What are some of the things that Farm Management Canada is up to? What are some of the things you're doing right now to move the needle?
Yeah, so we're doing a combination of, I would say, research and education and connection in the industry. So on the research side, we've just launched the results of our Farm Women study, which is super exciting, some really interesting insights that we'll discuss. And on the education and training, of course, you mentioned this conference. We have workshops in financial literacy. We have workshops in bridging the gap with farm transition, as well as some interesting kind of risk management activities. How do we look at what's happening in the changing business environment? How do we take a proactive approach? And what are all the connections we can make to the various aspects of business management? So it's a bit of a step-by-step, elephant one bite at a time approach.
Heather, keep up the great work at Farm Management Canada, and thank you so much. I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture. Now time for the top ag news stories of the day. Elevate your farm soil health and profitability with Farmer's Edge. Our advanced fertility services leverage cutting-edge technology for precise soil analysis and dynamic input applications with variable rate services. Visit farmersedge.ca/farmers to learn more. Let's dive in here to the top ag news stories of the day. Lots happening here on this Monday. Of course, COP28 is going on in Dubai. On that note, there's a editorial in the Wall Street Journal, and it says, first they came for the cars, then the cows. The climate lobby is now aiming to use taxes and regulation to restrict your meat consumption, according to a commentary item in today's Wall Street Journal by Alicia Finley. She writes, the global climate movement is increasingly advocating for the reduction of meat consumption through taxes and regulations. This push to limit meat consumption was highlighted at the United Nations COP28 climate conference in Dubai, where calls were made to address meat consumption alongside fossil fuels and gasoline-powered cars to achieve net zero goals. There's a list right there of things that some people just aren't willing to give up, right? Gas-powered vehicles, and you could maybe convince me to get an EV. You don't take my meat. No, that is where I draw the line. No way, Jose, are you taking meat? It's like, yeah, stop drinking, no longer can you have like a nice Guinness at the pub because of climate change. Sorry. I'm not jumping on that horse either. So, there's kind of a pretty hard line in the sand there, in that Dubai sand on that one. It seems a lot of pushback, but they are trying to encourage. We talked about this on Friday's show. They're trying to encourage and trying to get more meat consumption into places like Africa for nutritional requirements. But then at the same time saying it should really be cut back when it comes to first world areas of the world, like, say, Canada and the U.S. Now, speaking of climate change, interesting here, Kraft Heinz CEO Miguel Patricio is concerned about the impact of climate change on tomato volumes. And he says, it is very hard right now. There's a lack of tomatoes in the world. So I didn't realize this. And he basically says that there needs to be efforts to breed tomatoes resistant to the impact of climate change. So that's interesting coming from the CEO of Kraft Heinz. I didn't realize that there was such a shortage. Now, in livestock market news, big beef movement. Now, packers are struggling to push wholesale beef prices higher in the U.S., with choice holding in the upper 290 area and select around 265. But spot movement was strong last week, with load counts totaling 749, including 159 on Friday. The increased movement suggests retailers are gearing up for year-end beef futures. Yeah, well, that'd be good for demand. If we're gearing up, that means that there's an expectation of demand. Hopefully the consumer follows through. On the pork side, cash hog decline continues. The CME lean hog index is down 77 cents to 70.58 as of November 30th, extending the seasonal price decline. December lean hog futures, which expire on December 14th and are cash settled against the index on December 18th, finished Friday at a $1.98 discount to today's cash quote. February lean hog futures hold a 48-cent discount to the cash index. All those numbers courtesy of Pro Farmer. Belgium reports bird flu outbreak on farm near French border. Belgium has reported an outbreak of highly pathogenic H5N1 avian influenza on a poultry farm in the northwestern part of the country. The World Organization for Animal Health said the outbreak, the first this season, was detected in Dixmude. I think I'm not saying that properly. Not far from France. Basically the French border. How about that? Now, this is now earlier. Pete and I were talking about autonomy, and at Agritechnica, our coverage was brought to you by Corteva AgriScience and Optimum Gly. We saw a whole bunch of different ways that autonomy can be deployed, and what that may look like. And we've chatted about that a little bit here over the past numerous weeks. This is where it gets a little bit like, we have a video coming out, DJI, with some of their drones, but I don't remember the load capacity being this high. In fact, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. This is like large scale. This is big boy football kind of drone technologies. The company's Guardian Agriculture. It's a company that manufactures large autonomous electric vehicle takeoff and landing. So EVTOL. eVTOL? Not sure how you say that acronym, but they're drones for agricultural use. They've started commercial operations. So now get this. These drones are about the size of a small tractor, capable of carrying up to 200 pounds and can cover up to about 60 acres per hour. They offer greater efficiency by allowing the necessary chemicals or payloads to be left beside a field, enabling the drone to refill as needed for a specific task without having to return to a runway. Guardian Agriculture has received Federal Aviation Administration approval for commercial eVTOL service in the U.S. and has secured $100 million in customer orders. Wow. The company's focus on agricultural operations allowed itself to obtain the FFA approval ahead of other startups in the category that are primarily pursuing passenger service. Drone taxis. Yes. That's significant load. I wonder how many copters are on a drone that can carry 200-pound payload. That's substantial. It's pretty interesting how it's like some people think small drones, like many of them. Some people thinking we're going to go more this way, and the answer continues to be I don't think there's one way. Just like we see in the regular tractor, sprayer, harvester markets, it's all shapes and sizes, right? So interesting. Also fascinating that FFA basically allowed them to obtain their approval because it has to do with agriculture in comparison to some of the same rivals that are working on taxis. That's interesting sort of, I guess, carve out being made there when it comes to food production. Good story here, or interesting story here in Successful Farming, talking about how an analysis of farmland sales in the Midwest and Plain states found foreign investors paid 13.7% more than American purchasers for comparable tracts of land. But the infrequent transactions did not affect land values overall. Okay, so that was according to Mikhail Taylor, an associate professor of agricultural economics at Auburn University. Foreign ownership is a pretty hot politically debate right now, and it could result in the USDA becoming part of the powerful federal committee that decides if a foreign purchase poses a national security risk. Among the proposals in Congress to tighten U.S. oversight of land ownership or to ban sales to nations such as China and Russia, the one that I think that might get the most woven in, because I think of a lot of people would agree about it, is putting the Secretary of Agriculture on CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, according to Taylor. So some 37.6 million acres, or 2.9% of agricultural land in the country, is owned by foreign entities, with Canadian citizens and companies holding about 12 million acres. Yeah, Canadian companies or Canadian citizens are the largest foreign owner of U.S. farmland. China is 18th on the list in foreign ownership between Sweden and Spain, with interests of ownership or long-term leases on nearly 384,000 acres. So it's really not a lot. China gets a lot of attention in this regard. The other ones that pop in a lot are the impact of like Iran. Like we just sort of put some countries on those lists just because they are quite adversarial to U.S. interests. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Of course, you can find us across all the different social media platforms. You also can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Now, tomorrow on the show, hey, very, very cool. It's World Soil Day, so Lindsay Smith will be here, and tomorrow is all things soil on the show. You're listening to RealAg Radio. Thank you so much for getting real and getting connected, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by the BC Centre for Agritech Innovation at Simon Fraser University, your go-to for advancing agritech. Ready to elevate your farm business? Achieve the productivity and profitability you're looking for with Agritech Development Program. Google SFU Agritech Innovation to learn more.